podcast is brought to you by the Association for Coaching, one of the world's leading international professional bodies, advancing coaching in business and society worldwide. I'm your host, Helena Clayton, and in this 6-part series, we're exploring love in coaching. With 25 years of working in leadership and organisational development, for the last 8 years, I've been researching, writing about, and running leadership programs and workshops exploring the role of love in leadership, in work, and beyond. And for this series, I brought together 6 amazing coaches as my guests, all of whom are strong advocates and pioneers in what they do, and how they think about and integrate love into their coaching. 3 of them are writing books about love. 1 has just submitted their master's thesis about love, and another talks so boldly about love to their international and very senior leadership audiences that it takes my breath away. So thank you for being here and for bringing your curiosity to this thought-provoking series at a time when the world needs love more than ever. Hello, Claire. It is really good to be talking with you today.
And you too, Helena. This is a different forum for us to be talking in. So it is lovely to be in your listeners' ears today, as well as to be with you.
Because we've had loads of different connections. I think we've probably known each other for, I want to say 15 years, something like that. I think we were maybe both associates with an organisation doing some coaching work. And we met that way, and we've stayed in connection ever since, which is great.
Yes. And when I think back to that, I remember how I may not have described you as loving back then, but I think that's what I remember of you, is the love, the warmth.
I will take that. And I also remember that for me, part of the reason, at least, that I explore love in organisations and is that I know that it's a virtue, a quality, a capacity that I need to strengthen. So in a way, this work is also my work.
Mine too. Coming out of the corporate world and being so steeped in that more masculine archetypal energy of drive and performance and outcomes and success measures and KPIs, and now feeling my way into the more feminine archetype of love. That's certainly been my work in the last 2 years for myself, to become more loving in all areas of my life. So we might think of that only as being pertinent in our home lives, but it's so much more than that.
Yes, and the question for me too personally is I know very well the parts of me that are jealous, withholding, cold, controlling, mean, and I don't want those to run me. I would rather lead my life from more loving parts. And many people might be hearing your voice for the first time. So I wonder if I can invite you to say hello to people, who you are, what you do, introduce yourself to people.
So, Clare Norman, with a self-appointed nickname of Sunbeam, which I think has a lot of resonance with love. I didn't realise it when I chose it for myself, but the warmth, the growth, the nurturing that goes or comes from a sunbeam. That may not be how people expect a person to introduce themselves as a sunbeam. And I would not have done that while I was in the corporate world, but it just feels so much more aligned with me. But in terms of a classic introduction, I come out of a leadership development background and 10 years set up my own coaching business. So I have a mix of executive leadership transitions coaching and mentor coaching and supervision for coaches. And I'm also an author. So an author of Mentor Coaching, a Practical Guide, and The Transformational Coach, and Cultivating Coachability. And right now I'm in the midst of writing something that has the working title of Love as a Revolutionary Coaching Practice.
Oh, that's juicy. Lovely. Hopefully. Let's pick up definitely on revolutionary at some point. Thank you. I've not heard you use that word. in relation to this before. Let's go there. And I'm also thinking that there is the nurturing quality, if you like, of Sunbeam and what that brings. But I also experience you, and again, as I hear you introduce yourself there, as somebody who thinks about coaching. So you're a thinker in relation to coaching, which is a rare thing. But you're also steeped in upholding standards in coaching, right?
Yes.
So there's an element of boundaries, upholding standards, considering ethics. So there are those two very important dimensions of you and the way you come at your work and the way you come at love in relation to coaching.
Yes. And I would say that my branding, if you like, has been all around professionalization of the coaching industry. And I think it's really in the last couple of years that I've recognized that, yes, that's really important. And we need this other side in order to enable people to flourish. So it's not all about boundaries and ethics and professionalism. It is also about love. And I do want us to use the word love, as I know you do, rather than compassion or care or any of the other words that seem to be more acceptable in the corporate world, because there's something very different about the quality of love compared to the quality of compassion or empathy or care. So yes, I'm definitely feeling my way into the both and now.
Would you say more about what even your emerging thinking about the distinction, the difference between the bucket that's got empathy, compassion, care in, and using the word love? What's the difference that makes the difference?
I'm just trying to feel my way into that rather than think my way into it. I think I might refer to this paper that you and I were talking about yesterday, Love and Human Flourishing by Vander Vila and Lee. And they've done some research into what makes love rather than compassion or care or whatever. And they talk about the unitary nature of love and the contributory nature of love. And whilst they're not talking about love in coaching, I feel that the unitary piece is about me and my client being as one. Not that I'm in their skin, but really feeling that love for them and for their uniqueness. And I feel that that's more than the expression that we've used in the past about unconditional positive regard as well. I think it's a step on beyond unconditional positive regard. I'm still finding the explanation of that to be tricky, of what is it beyond unconditional positive regard that we're all so used to? What is it that's different from treating the client as creative, resourceful and whole, which is another expression that we're so used to hearing and espousing. Whether we live it is another matter. But I do think there's something that's additive about love over and above those two ways of being that is even more with them. I want to say alongside them, but I don't even know whether it's alongside. So there's something about that unitary nature of love, as well as I think the contributory nature of love. What do I contribute to that other person? Perhaps is less relevant for coaching. I don't know. As I speak this out loud, I'm like, am I making that up? What do I really think about that? So it's so on the cusp of something. I think when we talk about love, we're getting into unknown territory.
And when you listen back to this, you might think, oh, thank you, Helena, for asking me a question that I had done no thinking on at all. So yes. I'm very mindful that this is really asking you for your very first responses, which is a tad unfair, but thank you for going there. I was making a link as well to your word revolutionary. I think it's bold and revolutionary to use words like love in an organizational context because it's so countercultural, it's so taboo, it's so not allowed, it's so not done. But I think as coaching is evolving and as we're having more and more conversations about the crossover, the boundary, the connection with, for example, psychotherapy or therapy, there's something about just naming common human experiences that we all have a connection with love, with shame, with fear, with trauma. So I think there's something bold and revolutionary about naming things for what they are. There is clearly, but there is no shame in talking about shame or about trauma. Clearly, we're steeped in it, many of us.
Yes.
So yeah, I think there's something about just using the words that are the words.
Yes. And not pussyfooting around it.
Right.
Like not treading on eggshells or feeling we can't use that word because, it's just not the done thing to talk about love. But we're talking here not about eros love. We're talking about agape love. So agape meaning my love for the divine in you. And perhaps that's going together with the unitary piece. Agape love feels more akin to what we're talking about here. So that we're not stepping over that ethical boundary into something unethical. And this is not sexual or sensual or any of that stuff. This is really loving the human being who we are working with for all of who they are, for every single part of them.
Right. So I think I want to go next to the coaching field at the moment, and something about in your coaching practice or supervision practice, but in your coaching practice, what issues, for want of a better word, are people bringing these days that you're seeing? Is that changing? Is that evolving? And I'm wondering, are the things that people are bringing to coaching, do they invite a more loving response? So is the field, if you like, or are the issues that people are bringing, are they inviting more love in? Is that in part why more people are talking about love in coaching these days, do you think?
Maybe. There's always been, for me, the people who come to coaching have always wanted to talk about relationships stuff. So relationships at work generally, although because I'm working with the whole person and not just the work person, sometimes that might be relationships outside of work as well, because those have an impact on how they can show up at work. So that's always been there. I think maybe partly because of the way I've written my coaching bio these days, which does talk about love. It does mean that more people are gravitating towards working with me who are fascinated, curious about, I wonder how that might be to work with somebody in that capacity. Whether that necessarily changes the subject matter, the content, I'm not so sure, but more perhaps what they might be signing up for, what they might be opening themselves up for, curious about, and how that can support them in their work. Years and years ago, when I was in Accenture and I was writing an internal blog, and I had more followers than the CEO to whatever he was writing, because I was writing all about developing people. And although I never used the word love, when I look back on it, I'm like, that was the earliest forays that I was making into managers loving their people. And I honestly think that's why there were so many people reading my blog, because they were hankering after, how can I manage in a different way? How can I manage in a loving way? Although they might not have been asking that specific question, but how can I be putting people first over profit and over the operational mechanics of a business? So that's been something that people in managerial positions have craved for a long time, I think. That hasn't changed. But the people I'm coaching today, they are still thinking about, how do I have better relationships with the people I work with so that the business runs smoothly? And that feels like there's a relationship there to love, even though they might not call it love. Perhaps there's also more because of the increase in mental health as well, and people feeling the desire to be cared for by another, and that coaches are witnesses and hearing the person more exquisitely than they've ever been heard before, so that a person feels truly loved. Again, although they wouldn't necessarily call it love, but they often say, yeah, nobody else listens to me in the way that you listen to me. We might think of that as therapeutic territory, but I see it in coaching all the time.
And in the research I did back in 2018, I didn't define love. When I explored love in leadership and organizations, I chose not to define it. And I said to people, what is love? And the first bucket, if you like, was care in some way, shape or form, empathy. The second was listening.
Yes.
So people said really clearly that when somebody gave them 100% attention, when they put everything else aside and gave them undivided attention, when they really listened, that was love. It was felt and experienced and labelled, if you like, as love. So yes, I am with you. You talked about agape and connecting with the divine, and it is that. And it's as pragmatic as really listening, being fully present.
Yes, which is part of what we do as coaches anyway. And I think there's an extra notch somehow. I notice an extra notch in myself as I'm listening with love or listening through a lens of love, through a stance of love. There's just something additive somehow in that listening. I feel like there's a difference in the resonance between us, even though it's down the screen quite often, down the camera. There's some different vibration going on between us as human beings when there's this extra presence of love in the room.
Which is self as instrument work for the coach, right?
Yes.
It's like, how do I, whether in the 10 minutes before a coaching session or in the 3 years leading up to this coaching session, what's the work I'm doing to settle into access, to live from my version of a loving space, my version of a loving presence?
Yes. And you and I have both been on some programs which have enabled us to let go of some of the crappy stuff that was getting in our way of being loving. And so this is where I think where professionalism drove me previously, I now, in retrospect, look back on that and think I had no idea what self as instrument was back then, until now that I'm doing this inner work to really understand what's going on inside of me and what's getting in my own way and what's stopping me from being loving. And that's not me processing that in my head. It is doing the much more embodied work, whether that's through therapy or through a retreat like the Celebration of Being that you and I have both attended. I hope you don't mind me saying that out loud, Helena.
I do not. I'll plug them again. Celebration of Being, Google them.
Yes, brilliant. And so the kinds of developmental opportunities I'm looking out for now are much more in that space of vertical development, gestalt. How can I become more of the human being that I already am? But that really brings up this whole loving energy in me.
We'll move on to some practical stuff in a tick, but I was also reminded of a quote somebody put into a chat this morning that I'm going to mangle, but I hope I'll give the gist of it, which is something like, inside you, you have a bird and a stone. Your job is not to kill the bird with the stone.
Oh, yes.
So now, having said it, I'll have to find the source. It's probably attributable to Rumi. Everything is, right? But I'll try and find the source for that.
Yeah.
So what then does coaching with love, or bringing love into coaching, what does it look like in practice? Because there may well be people listening, and I would include myself here, right? Always in terms of, I fully believe it has a role. Now, how do I do that? How do I be it? How do I do it? So how would anyone know if there was love in a coaching session?
I don't think it's about doing more. There is the beingness of it. And to give an example, I was mentor coaching a brilliant coach the other day, and we were actually watching him on video. So I could see what was going on in him or not going on in him. So I was getting a visual picture of how he was relating to the person he was coaching. And I asked him, because I had this hunch that love was missing. And I asked him, where's the love? And for him, that was just a question that opened up so much exploration around it was about the boundary, actually. And in his case, it was because of the relationship he'd had with this person previously, which was as a co-worker, and not wanting to get back into a friendship way of being together, but therefore withholding love in this coaching relationship. And we could both see it, although could I describe that to you now? No, but we could see it, we could sense it, we could feel that it wasn't there. The connection, the presence, really honing into the very last thing that person has said. And I'm going to say, stroking the last thing that they've said. I mean, this must sound really odd to people who are listening. What's she talking about? What does that mean, to stroke the last thing that the person has said? But rather than having a question up our sleeve that we think is the next thing to ask because we've heard all this stuff that they've said. Actually being with them, totally present until they have completed their train of thought, because the very last thing that they say is where their thinking has got to. And that's the bit that we need to stroke and love and attend to. Let's call it attend to if we don't call it love. But give it some love, give it some attention, because although we might think the previous things that they've said are really important, actually they've got to this new place. And that's the bit that when we come back to listening, that's what we're listening for, is where do they get to? And although other coaches might not put love in the mix there, they might simply call it presence or listening or whatever. I feel like there's this added love for every single thing that they say, not skimming over anything. We can't pick up on everything that they've said, but that last place that they've just got to is the piece to give some love to, it feels to me, but by way of a question. So that was his realization of, I'm holding my love back because of this previous relationship we've had, and I didn't want to overstep the mark. And I think that's not always the scenario, the case study, but there will be other reasons why coaches hold themselves back from leaning into that. There'll be all sorts of mindset things that are getting in their way that they need to unlearn in order to be able to bring that love. I think I know some new stuff now that I didn't know before I started talking. Thank you.
Welcome. I like that. Stroking the last thing they said. I really do like that. Thank you for it. And I am going to go back to something you said earlier, actually, which is something around what I also heard you say was you brought in the word love, or a question that included love in it as a question, as a curiosity, and asked some version of, might love be at play here? Either a lack of love. So there's something too, I think, about inviting somebody to think about something through the lens of love, which is a phrase you used earlier.
Yeah.
So what's the most loving perspective on that? What might be a more loving way of saying that or looking at this? So that's another practicality, I think, that is available to us, to just gently offer a pair of spectacles or glasses that are love-based alongside heaps of other spectacles.
Yes, particularly if we have set out our stall at the beginning in contracting. That is where I might come from. With your permission, I may ask you about how love might attend to whatever it is that you're talking about in coaching. So there is something about contracting for that. And I'll give a counterpoint to that, which I've said to you previously, about a time when I just inserted a question with a client I'd been working with for a number of years. And it was a love question, and there was no context to it. I simply said, and what would love do? And he was like, what do you mean? So it can feel too much of a juxtaposition if it's not the kind of thing we've contracted for. And I hadn't contracted with him for that. I started working with him before I went on my own journey of love. However, subsequent to that, it has planted a seed and he has come back. The next time he came back, maybe we could look at that through a love lens.
Yeah, and it brings me to something that I know you think about too, which is ethics in coaching. And I'm wondering how surprising somebody like that is one of the reasons why I think love is problematic, because on the one hand, it's very easy to see love as clear and pure and unpolluted and obviously gorgeous and wonderful. It isn't the case for many people for whom the word love is tangled up with all sorts of complexities from early childhood. If I try and be as neutral as possible in terms of family systems where there may have been violence, which is also described as love. Thinking of someone in particular here, somebody who went to boarding school at a very early age, which sort of cauterized any connection with love. So for many people, when you introduce the word love as an automatic good thing, it really is not an automatic good thing for many people.
Yeah.
So there's something about being perhaps trauma-informed, even as we think about introducing something as so, inverted commas, obviously good as love. So yeah, it's lovely that you bring that. Are there any other ethical considerations to bring in if we think of love in coaching?
We've talked about the obvious one, that many people might shy away from it because they see it as eros love, which most certainly is not, and is not meant to ever stray into that territory. So we may get some transference, counter-transference that we need to take to supervision around that kind of thing. We know that stuff. We know that's front and centre in all the codes of ethics about that stuff. That's a big one, but I suspect that there are some more subtle ethical dilemmas that might be wrapped up in this, or not so subtle, is, as you say, the one about love is not all positive for all people. So there's something there. Something about the contracting for love. If we were to contract for it and a person really didn't want to see their work through that lens, we have no permission to go there. So we have to not go there or choose not to work with that person, which I realise is a privilege for those people who are earning enough to make choices about who they work with and not. There's an ethical thing when we're working in organisational cultures. So what's the contract we have with the organisation as well? So what do they expect? So if an organisation is expecting performance coaching and we're bringing something very different, we need to have that conversation with the organisation when they first start talking to us about coaching on their behalf for their people. I'm sure there are others that I haven't yet encountered, but they will raise their heads over time.
Yeah, and I've just been reminded, not everybody listening will know the name Kenneth Williams, the actor who's been dead a long time, from the, I want to say 60s and 70s, I don't know what age, but from the Carry On films. He was quoted as saying, "Love is the most awful invasion of privacy." He's not wrong. So there's love is the most awful invasion of privacy. You'd have to imagine Kenneth Williams saying it to get the full effect. Many folks listening will be able to do that. So I think there's that as well. We've come to position love as private for the domestic or personal space, not for public consumption.
Yeah.
So I think that's an ethical consideration. When are we being intrusive in some way? And I am not especially boundaried about, I don't mean as a coach, I mean as a person, in terms of I'll go anywhere, really. I'm really open, but not everyone is or wants to be or should be invited to be. So that comes up for me, I think.
Yeah. So it's not necessarily asking them about love in their life, unless that's where they've gone in the coaching, if they've chosen that route. So that is maybe, again, what makes this different from a therapeutic intervention. Maybe that would be a question that a therapist might ask in therapy, but as a coach, we would not be going into that territory unless they took us into that place. I'm just looking for a new supervisor at the moment, and she has just written me a love letter. In fact, she has spoken me a love letter. It is the most beautiful thing I have ever received. That's probably hyperbole, but it's the most beautiful thing I've received today or this week or this month. Just hearing her voice, and she's called it a love letter. And part of that was because in our first meeting together, I had talked about love, and that was part of my work. So it's part of the way that she is contracting with me and helping me to figure out what is it I'm bringing into this space? How will we contract? What is this work that we're doing? I loved it. Incredible. I don't know whether everybody would like to receive a love letter from a potential supervisor stroke spiritual director, but I am loving listening into it. I will listen to it, I feel like 10 times, and it will sink in more and more and more each time I hear it.
Fabulous. Thank you. And can we, and maybe this is the final question set, dip into supervision, actually, because you're a coach, mentor coach, and a supervisor. And I supervise also. I'm wondering if there are any differences between coaching and when we coach and when we supervise in relation to love. And it's a question I'm holding for myself. Is my supervision practice a more loving practice? ? I wondered if you had any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I'm noticing that my supervision practice is more loving. I'm finding that coaches are very open to it and open to me asking those kinds of questions about what would love do here, or inform your decision around this ethical issue, or any of those questions that are love informed. I feel much freer to be asking those with coaches. And maybe that's also partly because they know that this is work that I'm steeped in and that I'm writing about. And so they might tend to expect that of a supervisor who is in that territory anyway, more so perhaps than somebody in a corporate who has chosen a coach without knowing very much about the coach's background or exploration or whatever.
And if it was something other than that, it could be that. And if it wasn't that made the difference, what else could it be?
That allows me to be more loving.
I think so, yeah. Or allows people to be more open to exploring love in the session.
So, for example, I often, always will give people a question to ponder before they come. And we use that as the landing question. But I like to give them a bit of advance notice. So for those of them who do like to prepare, they can have a think about it before they come. And the landing questions I've been asking lately have been love related. And so we've already started there, right from the word go. And then that sets the scene, really. But also I'm thinking there's something back to what we talked about earlier about the coach's inner work around self as instrument feels to me to be about love for self and love for others. That is part of the inner work and knocking down the barriers inside of us to becoming more loving. So therefore, I think I do see supervision through that lens of how can we attend to you as human in order to enable you to be the best coach you can be. And that feels to me to be more of the love-based work. That's a great question. That would be partially why that comes up more in supervision.
Thank you. It's one I think I'll continue to ponder for a while. Thanks for prompting my own thinking as you answer. I'm mindful of time, Claire, so we probably need to be bringing this to a close. And I wonder, before I ask you how people can stay connected with you and find you and the wonderful work you do, I wonder if there's anything that you are hoping to talk about or mention or get to that we haven't got to that you might want to take some time to speak to now?
Simply to say that you've managed to gather so many coaches together for this series who are focused on love in their work. And there are many others who are similarly exploring this edge of coaching. And I'd like to invite more coaches into this arena of love, to be brave enough to come and explore it with us, because we are at an edge. We are pushing the boundaries here. This back to the revolutionary thing that I talked about earlier. I do think this is a revolution in the way, or maybe it's an evolution, but I think there's something about this. It feels like a big step for us to be taking into love because of so many obstacles that have been placed in our way as societally and corporately and all the nested systems that we are a part of. So I'd like to encourage listeners to listen to the whole of your series that you've been doing.
Definitely.
And get in touch with you because of all the great love stuff you do and the Love Lab, which, yes, I definitely want to mention the Love Lab on your behalf because that was my peak learning experience last year. And I so look forward to it this year as well because I am ready for the tingles that it gave me last year. So I'd like to encourage more coaches to, yes, get good at the competencies, add in this layer of love and start exploring love and what difference it might make to their coaching, to have both the masculine archetype and the feminine archetype coming together.
Lovely. Thank you, Claire. And I was on an online session last night where I heard somebody say that conversations about love were the most important conversations to be having these days.
Absolutely.
So that felt true for me.
Yes.
So I have loved this conversation with you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
And how can people connect with you, stay in touch with you, learn more about the really good stuff that you do?
They can come to my website, clarenormancoachingassociates.com. And if they want to read more about my ongoing thinking and feeling and sensing into this love thing, they can connect with me on LinkedIn, Clare Norman MCC. Those are probably the best two places to be with me on the journey.
Fabulous. And I can hear people's fingers moving on their keyboards as we sign off. Clare, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure. And you've really got me thinking as you have thought about this. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to another podcast by the Association for Coaching. For over 20 years, our purpose has been to inspire and champion coaching excellence, to advance the coaching profession, and to make a sustainable difference to individuals, organisations, and society. To find out more about the AC and our member benefits, follow us on LinkedIn or visit our webpage at associationforcoaching.com. There you can explore our digital learning hub and enjoy our extensive library of on-demand webinars, interviews, podcasts, and a portfolio of live events featuring thought leadership, tools and models, and the latest industry trends to help you develop your coaching expertise.